What is going on, guys? It's the Crazy Mook here, bringing you another video, and today I'm going to be answering that question that I myself had to answer not too long ago, with what shall I get, a restricted bike or a 250? Now, if you're in the same boat as me, you're under 21, you've done your A2 license, which will let you ride 33 brake horsepower or less. You've only ideally got a couple of options available, which is, do you get a bigger bike and restrict it, and then sort of have to worry about getting used to a big bike and it's heavy and more thirsty on fuel and upkeep and maintenance? Or do you grab a 250 that's really good and reliable and, you know, it's nice and easy to manoeuvre? Now, ideally, when I had to answer this one, it was I love using those pass lights. Yeah, I was so looking forward to getting a 250. I had my eye on the Ninja 250. Everyone around me had just passed their test, seemed to be getting 250s, and you know, I rode the CBR 250 that one of my mates had, and you know, it seemed enough. You know, that's it. You know, it would sit at 70 comfortably, which means you could do your national speed limit. It would get up to 30, 50 quick enough for everyday riding, and that's it. You know, that's pretty much all I thought I needed it for. But within 6 weeks, the 3 people I knew that bought brand new 250s, and within a week of buying those new 250s, they said, I wouldn't look back, I love this 250, and I wish I'd got one a lot sooner. Within 6 weeks, all of them had sold them and upgraded to restricted 600s. And to be honest with you, the theory really makes sense. It's get a bigger bike. I mean, you're not restricted to a 600 to restrict, if that makes sense, because somewhere out there, and I promise you that, oh my god, look at that Supra, sweet. There is a restrictor kit that will de-restrict a Yamaha R1 or, you know, a GSX 1000 to 33 brake horsepower. It might not cope well, in fact I would probably guarantee you it wouldn't cope well with the restriction, but it is possible. So the world is your oyster when looking at bigger bikes to restrict. Whether you want a bike to restrict that will cope with it well is another thing, because ideally you'll be looking at, I thought he was swearing at me then, I was just about to get abusive. No, that's not in my nature. I would have just been like, sorry for offending you. Oh dear, what was I talking about? So, where was I? So yeah, I really wanted the 250. I went up to the point of going into my Kawasaki dealer, sitting on it, looking around, looking at payment options, and you know, I was like an inch away from buying one, and I don't know, because when you've got everyone around you saying, yeah, 250s are great, they're brilliant, I wouldn't look back, you know, they do everything you'd want them to do, they're cheap to run, they're not too expensive to fill up on fuel, you get great miles to the gallon, and you just think, yeah, 250 is the way forwards. And then within 6 weeks they're like, nah, not really quite enough power there, and I got quite bored with it. So yes, I would recommend getting a more powerful bike, restricting it, because then, and this does seem very logical looking at it this way, what you've got is, depending on how long you've got left on your restriction, you know, I've got just under 2 years, I've got like 18 months left or something. What you'll be looking at is getting a bike, restricting it, new or used, it doesn't matter, then restricting it, and it depends on where you go to get the restrictor kit fitted, on how much it costs. And then you have that for like a maximum of 2 years, and if you don't get bored with the power, nobody says you have to take the restrictor off after 2 years. Nobody says, well, you know, your 2 years are up, get that restrictor kit off. You know, someone with a full bike license could have a 33 brake horsepower bike. It doesn't matter. So, you know, even if after the 2 year period you don't feel confident or something with the bike, and you're not bored of the power, then keep the restrictor on it, as long as it runs fine. You know, even a bike like this, the R6, which should have 125 horsepower, and it was restricted to 25 with 2 restrictor kits on it, it ran absolutely fine. There was nothing wrong with it, and because I hadn't ridden it unrestricted, I had no idea what it would be like, and that is the key there. Because you wouldn't have ridden the bike de-restricted unless you're doing it illegally. Then, yeah, I got a bit too trigger happy with the throttle there. You see, that is a restricted bike, and you see what it can do. You know, it can pull out and it can get up to speed as quickly as anything. Because a bike like this, you know, despite everything, it can beat absolutely anything to 70 miles an hour that you'll see on the road. It can beat that van and that car and this car and all those cars in that dealership and that car and that brand new Mercedes right there. It'll beat. You know, and how often do you see a Ferrari on the roads today, you know? And even so, I reckon you could beat it 0 to 50, 60. Well, maybe, you know. I reckon so, you know, 100%. So why would you, honest to God, want to jump on a bike with more than 33 brake horsepower at that stage in completing your test? You know, we're all still learners. Even Mr. Valentino Rossi is still a learner, even though he probably knows a damn sight more than anybody else about biking. He's still a learner, because you don't ride like you do on the racetrack when you're on the road. Otherwise, you're going to end up dead. So yeah, I would recommend getting a bigger bike and restricting it, because you know, you wouldn't have known what it was like de-restricted until you get it de-restricted, in which case you'll be legally fined too anyway. So you're not going to know what it feels like, as long as it runs fine. And you know, I don't think any garage is going to charge you for a bike that isn't going to run fine. You know, I was looking at getting bikes to restrict, and they were saying, well, you know, I was just throwing bikes at them, you know, like, what about this bike here? What about that to restrict? And they said, no, we're not doing that, we're not going to touch it. Suzuki GS500, for example, I went into my garage and I said, look, there's a Suzuki GS500 for sale, it's really cheap, but it needs to be restricted. Oh, come on. Jesus, wet woman. So, even so, he said, no, I'm not restricting that. He said it wouldn't cope well. Those bikes don't cope well to restriction, and I'm not going to do it. And so that's what you need to be asking is, will this cope well? And I'm sure your garage will be absolutely fine in saying yay or nay, because at the end of the day, that bloke turned down like 500 quid worth of work just to save me having a shit bike. And that's how it should be. So, you know, and after your 2-year period of restrictions up, and you think, yeah, you know what, I feel ready, I feel confident with the bike and the way that it, you know, I'm used to it, get your restrictor kit taken off, and you've got a whole new bike. And although I've ridden this bike de-restricted for a very, very short period of time, the difference is beyond anything. The power is in different places, it feels like different things, and it rides 100% different. So yeah, you got a 100% new bike, and so, you know, you'll be looking at getting a 600 and restricting it, and you'd probably be looking, if it's restricted well, you'd be looking at keeping it for like 2 to 4 years or something, you know. So, you know, you got the 2 years of your restriction period, which is the maximum, and then if you feel confident enough to move up, then you're going to have an entire new bike to play around and fall in love with all over again. And you know, you won't get bored of the power for like another 2 whole years, you know. So that is a long-term investment, and it's what I would recommend doing 100%. So that is my humble opinion on that. Please remember to rate, comment and subscribe, and feel free to leave any responses to the situation. I know that a lot of people aren't on their restricted licence, or are they? You know, nobody, you know, if I'd have said to that bloke in that van there, said, how much power do you reckon this bike's got? And he'd go, oh, 100 and something. You say, no, it's got 25. Nobody knows the difference, and because it can out-accelerate any car on the road, within reason, obviously, any everyday car, I shall say, within reason, again, there is no need to have anything more powerful. Absolutely no need whatsoever. So that is my 2 penneth. And yeah, as I said, feel free to leave a response. Please also remember to rate, comment and subscribe, and hit the like button if you liked the video. And I will catch you guys in the next vlog. So peace.